Before there was ever an electric refrigerator humming in the corner of every kitchen, folks still kept milk and kept it good, drinking fresh milk from their own cow long after milking with never a machine in sight. And my people, many of them, still do exactly that today, keeping milk fresh and cool with no electric fridge at all, using the same old wisdom folks used for hundreds of years. And today I'm going to share that whole old wisdom with you, how milk was kept without any refrigerator. But I'm going to be honest with you right from the start, the way I always am, because that title deserves a straight answer. Keeping milk truly fresh, sweet, drinking milk for weeks with no cold at all isn't really possible. And I'd never fib to you and say it was. What the old ways truly do is two things. They keep milk cool and so fresh and good for far longer than you'd think possible without a fridge. And they turn the milk, before it can spoil, into forms that keep for weeks and months. So let me give you that whole honest old wisdom, exactly as it is. Let me give you the simple truth at the heart of it first. Milk keeps by being kept cold. That's the whole secret, then and now. The warmer milk is, the faster it spoils. The colder it's kept, the longer it stays fresh and good. Your electric fridge just keeps it cold by machine. And the whole old art, before the machine, was finding ways to keep milk just as cold, using nothing but nature, the cool of the earth, the cool of the water, the cool of the air. Get milk cold and keep it cold by natural means, and it stays fresh and good for a good long while, days and more, with no machine at all. That's the first half of the old wisdom, natural cold, and the second half, for keeping it beyond that, was turning the milk into things that keep far longer, which I'll come to. So let me give you the natural cold first, the ways the old folks kept milk cold without any electric fridge. The finest of all the old ways was the spring house, and it's a beautiful thing. A spring house was a little stone building built right over a cool running spring, so the cold spring water ran right through it, along a channel or a trough in the floor, and the family set their milk, in cans or crocks, right down in that cold running spring water. Now spring water comes up out of the earth cold, steadily cold, all year round, cold in the deep of summer just as in winter, and milk set in that constantly cold, constantly running spring water was kept beautifully cold, near as cold as any ice box, and it kept fresh and sweet for a good while. The spring house was the old family refrigerator, running on nothing but the cold water flowing up free and endless from the earth, never failing, never costing a penny. Where a family had a good cold spring, the spring house kept not just the milk, but the butter, the cream, the cheese, all the dairy, cold and fresh, and it was one of the finest bits of old self-reliant wisdom there ever was. Now not everyone had a spring, so there were other ways to reach that same natural cold. There was the cold well. A deep well holds cold water down in the cool of the earth, and folks would lower their milk in a sealed container down into the cold well on a rope, down to where the water kept it cold, and draw it up when needed. The cold depths of the well kept the milk cold near as well as the spring. There was the cellar, the cool cellar or root cellar down in the steady cool of the earth, where milk kept far cooler and longer than up in the warm kitchen, though not so cold as the spring or well. And there was simply the coldest running water at hand, a cold stream, a cold creek, in which milk in a sealed can could be set to keep cold in the flowing water. Wherever the old folks could find natural cold, the cold spring, the cold well, the cool cellar, the cold stream, they used it to keep their milk, and it worked, keeping milk fresh and good far longer than you'd ever manage leaving it out in the warm. And there was a clever old way to make cold where there was none. And it's worth knowing, for it seems almost like magic, but it's plain nature. It's evaporative cooling. When water evaporates, it draws heat away and cools whatever it's leaving. So the old folks would set their milk container in a bit of water and drape a wet cloth over it with its ends sitting down in the water, so the cloth stayed wet, wicking the water up. Then they'd set it in a shady, airy spot where a breeze could move over it. And as the water steadily evaporated from that wet cloth in the moving air, it drew the heat away and kept the milk beneath noticeably cooler than the air around it, cool enough to help it keep. It's not as cold as a spring or a fridge, but where there was no natural cold to be had, this simple wet cloth evaporative cooling, using nothing but water and a breeze in a shady spot, kept milk and butter cooler and fresher, and it's a clever old trick anyone can use even today. Now there was another old practice worth mentioning that helped milk keep longer, and that's the gentle scalding or heating of the milk. Folks found that milk gently heated, then cooled, kept better and longer than milk left entirely raw, for the heating slowed what makes milk spoil. This is in a simpler old form the very same principle behind the pasteurizing that makes store milk keep so long and be so safe. So gently heating the milk and then cooling it was another old way to help it keep a good while longer, and it had the added good of making the milk safer besides, which I'll speak of honestly in a moment. Now let me come to the honest heart of that title, the keeping for weeks, because here's the real old wisdom. Even with all these good cooling ways, fresh sweet drinking milk doesn't stay fresh for weeks. It just doesn't, not without real refrigeration, and the old folks knew this perfectly well. So what did they do with milk they couldn't drink before it turned? They didn't waste it. They turned it, before it spoiled, into the forms of milk that do keep for weeks and months. They churned the cream into butter, which keeps far longer than milk, especially salted and kept cold. They made the milk into cheese, which keeps for weeks, months, even years, for the hard-aged cheeses, the greatest milk keeper of all. And they let milk sour in the old controlled way into clabber and cultured soured milks, which keep longer than fresh and were good foods in their own right. So the real answer to keeping milk for weeks was never keeping it as fresh, sweet milk for weeks, which can't honestly be done without cold. It was keeping the milk's goodness for weeks and months by turning it into butter and cheese and cultured milk, the keeping forms. That's the honest old wisdom, and it's a beautiful one. The cooling keeps the fresh milk fresh for days. The turning keeps the milk's goodness for months. Let me paint you a picture of a spring house, for it's worth seeing in your mind, one of the loveliest of all the old arrangements. Imagine a little building of stone, set down where a cold spring bubbles up out of the hillside. Inside, the cold spring water runs in along a stone channel, or fills a shallow stone trough in the floor, cold and clear and always moving, always fresh from the earth. And set down in that cold, running water stand the milk cans and the crocks of cream and the crocks of butter, the water flowing cool around them, keeping them cold as any ice box through the hottest summer day. It's cool and dim and damp in there, and the water murmurs, and the whole dairy of the family keeps fresh and cold in that constant flow, year-round, for free, forever. There's a beauty in it that a humming electric box will never have, the family's food kept cold by the living cold water of the earth itself. And it never failed, never broke, never cost a penny to run. Where a family was blessed with a good cold spring, the spring house was one of the finest things on the whole place, and rightly loved. Now let me tell you more about that evaporative cooling, the wet cloth way, because it's the one most of you could actually use today, even with no spring and no cellar, and it truly works. The old folks made simple cooling boxes on this principle, and you can too. The idea, remember, is that evaporating water draws away heat, so you take your milk, well sealed in its container, and you stand it in a shallow pan of water. Then you drape a cloth, wetted through, over the container with the bottom edges of the cloth sitting down in the water of the pan, so the cloth stays wet, drinking the water up. Then you set the whole thing in a shady spot where the air moves, a breezy shaded place. And as the air moves over that wet cloth, the water evaporates steadily, and every bit of evaporating water carries heat away, keeping the milk beneath cooler than the surrounding air, sometimes noticeably so, especially in dry, breezy conditions. It's not a fridge, and it won't keep milk for weeks, but it will keep it meaningfully cooler and fresher than just leaving it out, and it costs nothing but a little water and a cloth. Folks in hot, dry lands have kept food cooler this way for a very long time, and it's a genuinely useful thing to know. A way to make cold where you have none, from nothing but water and air. Let me give you the plain rules for keeping any milk as fresh as possible without a fridge, for they matter and they're simple. First, get it cold fast and keep it cold in the coldest natural spot you have. The spring, the well, the cellar, the coolest corner, the evaporative cooler. The colder and steadier the cold, the longer it keeps, always. Second, keep it clean and keep it covered. Milk must be handled with scrupulous cleanliness and kept well covered and sealed, for dirt and warmth and open air all hurry it towards spoiling, and it readily picks up off flavors from the air besides. Clean, covered, and cold, those are the three great rules. Third, keep it still and undisturbed where you can, for milk keeps a little better left settled and cold than jostled and warmed. And fourth, use it in good order, the oldest first, and keep an eye and a nose on it, using the fresh, sweet milk for drinking and turning the rest, before it can spoil, into the keeping forms. Follow those plain rules, and you'll keep milk fresh, without any fridge, for a good deal longer than most folks would ever believe possible. Let me tell you how it was for my own people. For the keeping of the milk was simply woven into the day. The milk came in from the milking, and it went straight to the cold, down into the springhouse water or the cool cellar, without delay, for you never let it sit and warm. The cream was skimmed and set aside for churning. What was drunk fresh was drunk in its day or two of freshness, cold from the spring. And the rest, the daily surplus that a good cow gives beyond what can be drunk, was turned faithfully into the butter and the cheese and the good soured milks that would keep. Nothing sat and spoiled, nothing was wasted. The cold kept the fresh milk fresh, and the good hands turned the rest into keeping food, and so a family with a single cow had fresh milk and butter and cheese the year round with never a refrigerator in sight. It was a rhythm, a daily wisdom, and it worked beautifully, as it had for their parents and grandparents before them, back and back, through all the generations that kept milk with nothing but the cold of the earth and the skill of their hands. And it's worth pausing on how completely we've forgotten all this, for it shows how much we've handed over. There was a time, not so very long ago, when every farming family knew these ways as a matter of course, when the spring house and the cellar and the cool were simply part of every home, when no one needed telling how to keep milk without a machine because there were no machines and everyone simply knew. And then the electric refrigerator came into every kitchen, and within a generation or two, the whole body of knowledge, the spring houses and the cold wells and the evaporative coolers and the daily rhythm of it was very nearly forgotten entirely. The spring houses fall into ruin, the knowledge gone from most minds. It's a remarkable thing how fast a wisdom that served humankind for its whole history can slip away once a machine takes over the task. But the knowledge isn't truly lost, only set aside, and the old ways work exactly as well as they ever did, waiting to be picked back up by anyone who wishes to know them or who someday needs them. Now let me be the honest, careful neighbor and give you the plain and serious cautions, because milk is a food that must be handled with real care, and this matters greatly for your health. First, milk can spoil and can carry sickness if it's not kept and handled cleanly and properly. So cleanliness and good cold keeping are everything. And if milk has truly gone off, smells or tastes wrong, or you're in any doubt, don't drink it, for spoiled milk can make you ill. Trust your nose and your good sense. Second, and this is important, I must speak plainly about raw milk, the fresh, unpasteurized milk straight from the cow. While it's traditional and many prize it, raw milk can carry real risks of serious sickness, especially for the young, the old, the pregnant, and those who are frail. And this is a genuine and serious matter, not to be taken lightly. And the laws about raw milk differ from place to place. This is a big part of why the old gentle scalding and the modern pasteurizing came to be, to make milk safer. So if you're ever dealing with fresh milk from a cow, learn the proper safe handling thoroughly from good trusted sources, understand the real risks honestly, consider the value of heating it, and make a careful, informed choice, especially where children are concerned. And third, the making of butter and cheese and cultured milk for keeping must be done properly and cleanly by good, safe methods to be safe to eat. So learn those old arts properly before relying on them. I share these old ways because they're wonderful and worth knowing, but always, always with the care that food safety and your health deserve. With all those honest and serious cautions given, let me tell you why this old wisdom is still so valuable and so worth knowing, even in a world of refrigerators. The first reason is the plain understanding it gives you, the knowing that milk and food in general doesn't actually need a machine to be kept, that the cool of the earth and the water and the air can do the work, that folks fed themselves well for all of history without a single refrigerator. That understanding is freeing, and it's real security, for it means that even if the power failed, even if the machines stopped, you'd know that food can still be kept the old natural ways, that you're not utterly helpless without the electric fridge. That knowledge alone is worth having. The second reason is that these old ways still genuinely work and still have real use today. The evaporative cooling can keep things cool where there's no power. The cool cellar keeps food well. And anyone with a cold spring or a cold cellar has right there a natural cold store that costs nothing to run and never fails in a power outage. In a world grown so dependent on the humming machine, these old ways are a real and practical backup, and for some, a daily way still. And the third reason, the deepest, is that whole spirit of self-reliance and working with nature that runs through all of it. See how the old folks looked at the problem of keeping milk cold, and instead of needing a machine and the power to run it, they simply used what nature gave free: the cold spring, the cold well, the cool earth, the evaporating water, the moving air. They worked with nature's own gifts rather than against them, and kept their food beautifully with no machine and no cost at all. That's the old genius, the old self-reliance, using the free gifts of the natural world with knowledge and cleverness, rather than depending on bought machines and bought power for every single need. And that spirit, That way of seeing is worth far more than any single trick, for it can be applied to 1,000 things. And here's a practical thought for you today, even with your fridge humming away. Knowing these ways means you're never truly helpless. If the power goes out in a storm, you know to move your cold things to the coldest natural spot, the cellar, the cold basement corner, a cold stream if you have one, and to rig a simple wet cloth evaporative cooler in a shady breeze to keep things cooler than the air. You know that a cool cellar can store a great deal that folks needlessly crowd into the fridge. And you know that if you ever kept a cow or a goat, you could keep its milk the old cold ways and turn the surplus to butter and cheese, needing far less of the machine than folks assume. That old knowledge is a quiet security tucked in your back pocket, ready whenever you need it. So here is what I'd leave you with, honestly. The old folks kept milk without a fridge in 2 honest ways, and now you know them both. They kept it cold by nature in the springhouse, the cold well, the cool cellar, the cold stream, and by the clever evaporative cooling of the wet cloth in the breeze, keeping fresh milk fresh for days, far longer than you'd think. And they kept its goodness for weeks and months by turning it, before it could spoil, into butter and cheese and cultured milk, the keeping forms. Not by some impossible trick of keeping raw sweet milk fresh for weeks with no cold, which can't honestly be done, but by the real, honest, clever old wisdom of natural cold and wise transformation. Take that understanding, handle milk always with the care and safety it deserves, and you'll know something most folks have entirely forgotten, that food can be kept the old, natural ways, with nature's own free gifts come what may. Because in the end, the humming machine in the corner, useful as it is, was never the only way to keep milk, and folks kept it well for all of history without one. That old knowledge of natural, cold, and wise keeping is a piece of real security and real self-reliance, and it's yours now to keep. If this is the kind of honest, practical old wisdom you've been hungry for, the kind that makes you capable and self-reliant and connects you back to the good sense of those who came before, then stay here with me. There's so much more where this came from, and I aim to bring it back to you, one piece at a time, always honestly, always with care. Subscribe, and we'll keep remembering the old ways together, because some of the most valuable things we ever knew are the simple ones we let ourselves forget, and the old wisdom of keeping our food with nothing but nature's own cold is surely one of them. And do always handle milk with care for your health, for that's the wisest old way of all.